What's going on, guys? It's Tetrosphere, and I wanted to bring you a video today to help start preparing for the Alliance Insight formats. And what I have here is 10 hidden techs that I think you might be sleeping on for this format. Now, of these techs, most of them are good against both Mitsurugi and Malice. This first one here, as you can see, I have it specifically for people playing Mitsurugi to side in against Malice. But anytime it's not meant to be good against both or for both to play, then I will specifically point that out. But let's go ahead and jump right on in. Like I said, first thing I have here is Deck Devastation Virus, which says tribute one dark monster with 2,000 or more attack. That's cost. Look at your opponent's hand, all monsters they control, and all cards they draw until the end of their third turn after this card's activation, and destroy all those monsters with 1,500 or less attack. Now, against Malice, the only main deck monster that will survive this virus is Wizard at Ignister. Everything else is 1,500 or less. All the Malice names, the strongest one is Chessie Cat, who is at exactly 1,500. In addition to this, this will actually advance your own game plan by tributing a Mitsurugi monster, triggering its effect. So I think that for Mitsurugi players, especially peer siding in against Malice, this is a phenomenal pick. Let me just adjust my size here a little bit. Righteous. Okay, so now we have Deck Lockdown. This is phenomenal against Mitsurugi because everything adds. Against Malice, it's pretty mediocre. It does, however, stop Backup Ignister, TB11, or Mad Tea Party. So it's not great against Malice, but it can be okay. This probably isn't something I would main deck for that reason, but you could side it against Mitsurugi. Specifically in like Centurion, I think you could main it just because it's also so good against Rogue and your deck has such great synergy with Deck Lockdown. But again, another great choice. A bit not so versatile in its application, but definitely puts Mitsurugi in a really bad spot. Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. Now, I don't think anyone is necessarily sleeping on this, but I think it is just so good it's worth mentioning. Obviously, against Mitsurugi, as long as they aren't attempting to revive from Banish, any of the monster's effects to revive themselves will trigger Engrave, and Ghost Bell can negate those. It also can negate the Mirror Ritual spell because it does include an effect to Ritual Summon from the graveyard. Against Malice, of course, you can simply Ghost Bell either the Grin Without a Cat Trap or White Binder effect to banish from Grave. Both of those are really good spots for Ghost Bell. Gravekeeper's Inscription. What I really like about Gravekeeper's Inscription against Mitsurugi is that either the Floodgate that you can't activate effects in Grave or the Floodgate that you can't special summon from Grave is going to be really good. So depending on the deck you're playing, you can pick one of those effects to be virtually one-sided. So for example, if you have a deck that activates a lot in Grave, but none of those effects actually special summon, then like from the graveyard, then you might be in a really good spot to just use the neither player can activate card effects in the grave. So for example, something like, I don't know, Fiendsmith Unchained. Yeah, you can't, Engraver can't revive itself and Yama can't revive a monster, but Soul of Rage can still add a card back. Desiree can still activate to send a card. Paradise can still activate to send Desiree. Or maybe you're in the opposite situation. You play a deck that wants to special summon from Grave, but you don't actually trigger in Grave. So any kind of like deck that has like spells that extend from Grave or link monsters that extend from Grave. For example, Cyber's link climbing, right? Like Splash Mage. If you activate the Floodgate that says neither player can activate effects in Grave, Splash Mage can still revive from Grave. But either of those Floodgates are great against Mitsurugi. Against Malice, if you do the neither player can banish cards from the graveyard, that is obviously going to stun White Binder. Or you can do the effect that neither player can special summon monsters from graveyard to turn off Wizard Ignister or Allied Code Talker. I personally think that neither players can banish is probably a bit stronger, especially going second. But that's just going to depend on the deck you're playing and the game state, what you think is going to be a bit more impactful there. Dominus Impulse. This, of course, is completely dependent on your deck's ability to actually play Dominus Impulse. But if you can, There are tons of great effects to hit with Dominus Impulse. Of course, the Mitsurugi Ritual is a phenomenal time to impulse. You could also impulse any of the Mitsurugi Ritual monsters' effects to revive themselves from grave when they're tributed. An interesting choice here, I think, is if you have another trap in grave already and they end on Matama, you can impulse Matama's effect to revive a reptile from grave, because not only will that destroy the Matama instead of tributing it, but also they won't get that body, so it's kind of like a 1-for-2 in that way. Against Malice, I think you're most likely going to hit one of the main deck names effects to summon themselves from Banish, but if you don't have another hand trap like Ghost Bell to prevent the White Binder from summoning herself from Banished, or the GWC trap to revive a Malice from grave or Banish, if like Impulse is your only hand trap, then I think you'd probably be better off using it on one of those. But if you have like Impulse and Ghost Bell, then I think you want to like Ghost Bell Gwyn without a cat and then save the Impulse for, you know, maybe White Binder's effect to summon itself if they try to like March Hare, banish the White Binder from grave because GWC got negated. That'd be a good time to do that too. But definitely be playing Impulse if you can in this format. Mistaken Arrest. This is basically the same as Deck Lockdown. It's mediocre against Malice. Basically, all it's going to prevent is backup from adding, and it's going to prevent MTP from adding, so they can't banish the MTP. But against Mitsurugi, it's phenomenal. So basically, everything I said about Deck Lockdown applies here for Mistaken Arrest. It's just going to be based on whether you think you want it to have as a continuous effect or a lingering floodgate, or you know, maybe you value Mistaken Arrest being a quick play, or you're playing Centurion. Deck Lockdown is definitely better because, of course, Auxilla protects the lockdown. So that's between the two. It's just which one you think is best for your deck. Soul Drain, phenomenal against both decks. The Mitsurugis that tribute will not be able to trigger, and the banished Malice names will not be able to trigger. Now, obviously, because it's so good against both decks, you're not playing this card if you are playing Mitsurugi or Malice, because it also shuts off your game plan. But if you're playing an off-meta deck and you're trying to counter the meta, I think Soul Drain's a no-brainer. This card is phenomenal against both of the decks. Spell card Monster Reborn. When a Mitsurugi monster's effect triggers to revive itself from grave, you can chain Spell card Monster Reborn and take that shit. They won't get the body, you will, especially if you're playing a deck like Malice. You now have it for Link material, or if you're playing it for Mitsurugi, you now have it for tribute fodder. And it won't trigger in their graveyard again because you can only use those effects once per turn. A really interesting thing you can do with Malice as well, if your opponent Lancias you can Monster Reborn to summon their Lancia to your side of the field, and then when the turn flips back over, tribute the Lancia. So it's a really nice way to like kind of turn skip them right back. I also really like it to interrupt White Binder. If White Binder attempts to banish White Rabbit, you can chain this, take the White Rabbit, it won't banish, they won't get to set MTP. Grave of the Super Ancient Organism. This one is specifically for Malice players playing against Mitsurugi because it's essentially a one-sided floodgate. Level 6 or higher special summon monsters on the field cannot declare attacks, nor can players activate their effects. That means the ritual monsters' effects on the field are completely turned off, so they can't Raigeki, they can't special summon from grave with Matama, and they can't even declare attacks with them. So they're basically relegated to using the level 4s to swing, which are not going to be strong enough to swing over your Malice monsters. Now, against Ryzeal Mitsurugi, they of course have plenty of ways around this, so I would say it's really only good against Pure. But if Pure ends up being like the prominent version, and you're playing Malice, I think this could be an interesting tech as well. Super Polymerization, I think, is the only board breaker in this format that I would say is really good right now. Mitsurugi is going to play into Garura. Because the monsters weren't tributed with Poly, they're not going to trigger Engrave to summon themselves, and they can't negate it with Mirakumo or the Purification Trap. Similarly, against Malice, you can make Cyberus D-Save Worm or Earth Golem Adagnister, and Allied Code Talker cannot respond to it, so they can't tribute that. All the other board breakers in the game, I think, are going to be super mediocre right now. I think Dark Ruler is going to be super mediocre. I think, like, Raigekis are going to be super mediocre. I think, your back row hate's going to be okay. But essentially all that's going to do is bait and negate, right? Like, Super Polymerization is, I think, the only one that's actually going to be meaningful, because you're essentially going neg 1 to take away 2 or more monsters from their side of the field. You know, you use Super Poly in a discard, make your Garua or make your D-Save Worm. They lost 2 or, you know, depending on what you're making, maybe more monsters. I think Super Poly could be really decent here. I really hope that this gave you guys some ideas, got the juices flowing, especially if you're playing off meta decks, ways to counter the meta, ways to make your rogue decks viable. I think a lot of these cards really could have huge impacts. And I think, I mean, obviously some of these are like known cards like Super Poly and Ghost Bell and Impulse, but a few of these I think are quite overlooked and might, you know, give you that surprise factor at your next event. I appreciate you guys checking out the video. I will catch you in the next one. Peace.